Sentry mode activated. Target acquired.
Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild every day for like 5 days now. I want to see how far I can keep this going. Anyways, I do have plenty of builds I'm working on in the Remnant from Hell mod that I'd love to share with y'all. I'm trying to split up the mod power builds because I could do like 10 of those back to back and that would get old. Mods are great in From Hell, but my original love in Remnant was Bandit Armor and shotguns. And if you don't know, I love shotguns a lot. Like in any game, I'm always going for shotgun, good or bad, doesn't matter. Remnant shotguns just happen to be amazing, and they feel just as good to use. And the Bandit Armor is just Spareshot armor from Monster Hunter World, so how could I resist putting those together? Anyway, enough of the preamble. Today I want to talk about the Bandit shotgun build in the From Hell mod, because it's a little different than base Remnant. And I'm going to start off by saying it's definitely not as good as base Remnant's version, not because it got nerfed in any way, but just due to the fact that enemies have so much more HP and the double elites and adds and fights. The build just doesn't function well by comparison to some other builds in the From Hell mod. We didn't gain any damage in the form of equipment buffs or new items to utilize, and we still have like no AoE with very long reload times, and swarms of enemies just kind of murder this build. So it's just not as strong due to enemy buffs, not so much player nerfs. That aside, it is still a powerhouse, especially on bosses, and with enough RNG you can dish out some crazy damage. On the flip side though, Bandit Armor has no defenses and you die to one hit in pretty much most everything in the Hell difficulty, so that's a shame. It's a glass cannon build. So let's start by discussing the armor, because unlike most builds that revolve around a mod or a weapon, we're going to be working around the entire armor set. Bandit Armor did get a slight change in the From Hell mod. The ammo refund chance was increased from 35% to 40%, which is not a lot, but it's still effectively more DPS that is entirely up to RNG. And the passive was changed from more ammo on pickup to more ammo reserved, which makes it feel so much better in my opinion. A lot of people disregard the Bandit Armor because it doesn't actually buff your weapon's damage at all, and losing 20 to 30% multiplicative damage is a huge hit to most builds, so I understand that. But you're actually gaining damage by not losing out on downtime firing due to reloading your weapon, so more ammo is basically more damage. I know this is kind of obvious to most people, but this is kind of what we're building around, so I do have to get a little deep into it. So there is a reason why I'm using the weapons that I am, besides the fact that I just love shotguns. To make the most out of Bandit Armor, you do want to use weapons that have notoriously bad reload speeds, such as Fusion Rifle, Repulsor, Typewriter, or Sawed-Off, or weapons that have really low clip sizes, so you can prolong the reloading by getting a bunch of extra Spareshot procs. Like sniper rifles and spore blooms, they have clip size 1, but if you can get 2 back-to-back procs, that gives you 3 really fast shots without having to reload twice in between. It's huge damage potential. Again, I know it sounds demeaning and like a no-duh case, of course use it on small clip size weapons, but it's something that you really have to consider with Bandit Armor. Like, I wouldn't use it for Typewriter or SMG, or even the Sniper actually, just due to weapon handling, recoil, and the alternative means of reloading like Provisioner's Ring. It's very much trial and error to see what weapons actually work well with Bandit Armor. So, sorry for the long Bandit Armor 101 explanation, but it is key to understanding how to effectively use the armor. So we're going to look at the 2 weapons to use with this armor. Obviously you can see I'm already using Sawed-Off and Coach Gun, so let me explain why in context to the Bandit Armor. For the primary weapon, we are using the Sawed-Off shotgun. Not only is this probably the strongest weapon in the game, but it's perfect for Bandit. It has a low clip size, and with 40% Spareshot chance, we can realistically expect 2 or 3 extra shots per clip, because you gotta realize that it's not just 40% more ammo. Each shot can proc off a refunded ammo, so you could get 3 procs in a row on the first shot and just never lose a round. When it works, it's a lot of extra ammo. The reload for Sawed-Off is atrociously bad too, especially for having 3 rounds to put in, so having the extra ammo is incredibly handy in prolonging that reload. The Sawed-Off does have flaws though, its spread and range are awful, but we'll get back to that. The long gun of choice is the Coach Gun. You should know, dude, Coach Gun is the best weapon in the game. It's perfect, I love this thing. It's got a 10-meter range, which is further than other shotguns, but it's still low range compared to other weapons. It has a very tight spread and a very fast reload that does reload both shots at the same time though. Now, due to the extremely fast reload speed, you probably wonder why we're using this over something like the standard shotgun. Well, the standard shotgun is a pump and does have to pump after each shot, which is rather annoying, and the rate of fire is pretty bad, so even getting those extra hits from Bandit in doesn't really feel any better. The coach gun, on the other hand, is extremely fast because it's supposed to be just a quick over-under shot, but when you get extra rounds from the bandit proc, you can just keep firing at that same rate of fire, making it very, very fast. It's kind of the same thing with the sawed-off. It's already fast, so more ammo just makes it nuttier. Now let me talk about options that didn't make the cut for this build. Spore Bloom is a weapon I love, but since both it and the sawed-off are extremely close range, I didn't actually want to use Spore Bloom and the Spareshot mod. Spore Bloom's clip 1 makes it very reliant on the proc, which makes it feel good to get 3 Spareshots in a row, but it still reloads way too often and it feels extremely hit and miss on that proc. Now Coach Gun's clip 2 gives you better odds at gaining and maintaining the Spareshot proc. Twin Shot and Crossbow are actually projectiles and not hit scan, so if you shoot Twin Shot while more than a few yards from your target, you'll actually start your reload before they land and have a chance to activate Bandit. And at close range it works, but at long range it's very spotty, so I just don't like that. I find it inconsistent. Sniper Rifle has a large amount of recoil, and I don't like having to do the subsequent shots on that with such precision, especially at further ranges. Ricochet Rifle is also in a similar boat to Twin Shot. Once you fire it, you start reloading, so you don't actually get to trigger Bandit's proc off of it. Ricochet Rifle would need 2 rounds in its clip as a non-hit scan weapon to function. And Hive Cannon is actually a good choice since the explosions can proc Spareshot and therefore giving you damn near infinite ammo, but the gun itself isn't really doing much damage, and I just don't really like it for this build. Alright, so with the armor and weapons out of the way, let's talk about the trinkets. There are a ton of options you can choose here, lots of ways to be building this kind of setup. First thing I want to note is that I'm using Shattered Vertebrae. This item was reworked in the From Hell mod and now makes it so that when you don't crit with a ranged attack, the next source of damage is guaranteed to crit and increases crit damage by 15%. This is effectively acting like 50% crit rate. It's not really, but it's close enough. And shotguns have low crit rate already, they're just sitting at 5%, so even with max traits and Icy Fruit, we only have 35% crit rate. So this amulet would be effectively giving us 15% crit rate and 15% crit damage. It's not as good as something like Polished Whetstone, which is 35% more crit damage, but it also doesn't require me to run Bleed, which is important because I like to use World's Edge as my weapon for dealing with groups of enemies. And the only other way I'd be able to get Bleed is from Phantom Knives, and I guess this is actually a good segue into talking about the weapon mods while I'm here. I'm using Corrosive Aura on my sawed-off because we're going to be mostly in close range anyway, and Corrosion's super OP. I don't need to say anything else, it's just Corrosion, guys. For the coach gun, we do have a few choices. Song of Swords and Hunter's Mark are always a good option for range builds, but the extra crit wouldn't really help us here since we're using Shattered Vertebrae. And while Song of Swords is fine, I opted for Ice Spear to guarantee frozen uptime on the boss. Remember that frozen enemies take 20% increased damage, which is effectively a multiplicative modifier compared to Song of Swords' additive modifier. While I could use Phantom Knives to get Bleed and then run Polished Whetstone as my neck, I feel like the Freeze and the Shattered Vertebrae is a better choice because that also leaves my melee slot open to use as ad control, and I don't have to maintain melee attacks on bosses. Apologies for the sidetrack on going to the mod stuff, let's get back to the rings. My main choice for this build is actually Provisioner's Ring, and I'm sure some of you are asking why? What's the point of having Provisioner's Ring and Bandit Armor? Well, honestly, it's because I don't want to reload at all. I want to keep firing. That is the name of the game. And as much as I like Bandit Armor, eventually I'm going to have to reload. That or use ammo boxes, which is effectively the same thing, but just faster than reloading both weapons, whatever. But the idea is that I can use Provisioner's Ring to fire my sawed-off, swap to coach gun, fire that, and then swap back the sawed-off and just never stop firing until I run out of ammo. That is in theory at least. In practice, I still have to reload because the sawed-off is still slow. But that's another reason why I'm using the coach gun, because it has a very fast reload already, so it's not that big of a deal, and I'd much rather reload that than the sawed-off. So while I'm using the coach gun, the sawed-off is reloading itself while stowed. Again, this is DPS in the form of having more shooting uptime rather than directly affecting the damage. The other ring, totally a toss-up and up to you. I swap it around depending on the fights. For clearing and some bosses, I use the new Iskall Hunter's Band. This was buffed to reduce spread and give increased weapon range, which is perfect for shotguns. Don't have to explain much about it, it's just better and it's everything that we need in a ring. Now, if you're fighting something up close, then you have a couple other options in my eye. First would be Ring of Flawless Beauty if the target has an easily accessible weak spot. Then you can also use Burden of Gambler if it does not have a weak spot, in which case you probably want to change Shattered Vertebrae to Onyx Pendulum since we're constantly swapping weapons anyways. You can also use the empowering loop for just solid damage, though we do lose some of the fire rate, which is a shame. Damage is still worth it. And of course there are some other niche rings depending on the bosses or situations, such as Akari's Warband ring or whatever else. I just prefer those options to loop through though. They have fewer conditions attached. Okay, so that was a lot to talk about for such a simple build, I apologize. But the Bandit Armor and set is more complicated than it seems, as you have to squeeze out damage in other ways besides just raising numbers. Again, I don't think this build is as effective here in the From Hell mod, but it still does hold up. It's a great bosser, and I just happen to love watching a sawed off get 4 procs in a row and just dump a ton of rounds into a boss. But that's it for me though. Thank you all for watching. As always, I much appreciate it, and good luck out there, hunters.